Good morning. Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Nancy Melito. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. This congregation is a welcoming and inclusive community that seeks to create a more just and compassionate world. If you are new to Accotink and would like to talk more about this church, please be sure to reach out to me, our minister, Reverend William Levewood, or one of today's greeters. Today, it is our privilege to have Kirk Freeman as our worship leader. Thank you for filling in today. Kirk is a UU seminarian, having done his internship at UU Rockville of Maryland. In his prior career, Kirk worked in politics. First as a congressional aide, and then as a government relations executive for a large trade association. Kirk lives in DC with his spouse, Betsy, who works as a postpartum doula and an OWL-trained sexuality educator. Right here at Accotink, she did her training, I'm happy to say. Together, they are raising 2 elementary school-aged children. One quick announcement. Don't forget about our auction, and our donation cutoff is September 26th, and we do our live auction October 29. So, whether you're a longtime member, a newcomer, or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour, online and in person, immediately after this service, and we're so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. It is so good to be with you this morning. My name is Kirk Freeman, and my pronouns are he and him. This is my first time here at Accotink, and as Nancy shared, my wife Betsy has been here before for a OWL training, and she told me just how beautiful this space was and the land around it. And thank you, Accotink, for offering that OWL training and offering that service to our wider faith tradition. Now, as we begin our service, I invite you to silence your phone, or if you're online, to close other windows on your computer and find your breath and center yourself for this time of worship. We open in welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that this church, like all of the community of Burke, rests on unceded territory of the Monohoic people of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation and the Potawatomi Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice. Our chalice lighting this morning comes from Reverend Stephen Schick, a UU minister. It is a piece named "This Sacred Place." This sacred place has been waiting for us to gather our dreams of justice and peace. This place has been waiting for us to honor it by opening our hearts and speaking our minds. This place has been waiting for us to fill it with compassion and loving kindness. This place has been waiting for us to draw from it a breath of common purpose. This place has been waiting for us to listen to the wisdom of its silence. This place has been waiting for us to fill it with the urgency of new possibilities. This place has been waiting for us to make it sacred by our coming together. Come, beloved travelers and seekers, let us worship together. It's an honor to be here with all of you. And I want to share a story this morning as our story for all ages. It's entitled "Going Places" by Paul and Peter Reynolds. Raphael had been waiting all year for the Going Places contest, a chance to build a go-kart, race it, and win. When their teacher announced who would like the first kit, Raphael's hand shot straight up. The rest of the class watched enviously as Raphael walked back to his seat with a kit. Mrs. Chanda assured them, "Don't worry, you'll all be getting one." And they're all exactly alike. The kit came with a set of precise instructions. That made Raphael happy. He was very good at following directions. He hammered, glued, nailed, and assembled his kit. His go-kart looked just like the one in the directions. He was feeling quite proud. He wondered how his classmate Maya was doing. She lived right next door. He peered over the fence. "Hey, Maya, you haven't even started." Maya didn't respond. She was so intent on watching the bird in front of her and quickly sketching it that she didn't even notice Raphael. Then she put down her pencil and stared at the bird dreamily. Raphael shrugged and let her be. The next morning, Raphael checked back in to see how Maya was doing. "Wow, what is that?" he asked. Maya grinned. "You like it?" Raphael responded slowly, "Yeah, it's extremely cool, but, Maya, there's just one little problem. That's not a go-kart." Maya smiled. "Who said it had to be a go-kart?" Raphael was confused. The set of instructions inside the box were for a go-kart, but then again, they didn't say it had to be a go-kart. He looked at it again, at Maya's contraption, and after a moment, he grinned. "I get it. Hey, Maya, I really want to win this race, and the instructions never said we couldn't team up either." And so they did, working late into the evening. The next day, everyone gathered for the big race. Each go-kart was a perfect replica of the other, except for one. One of the kids laughed. "Looks like you had trouble with the going places instructions. You're going places all right. You're gonna lose." Maya and Raphael didn't even have time to respond because the announcer's big, boomy voice called out, "Attention racers, start your engines. 4, 3, 2, 1. A buzzer sounded, and they're off. Well, while all the other go-karts disappeared in a cloud of dust, Maya just sat there, motionless in their vehicle. Raphael shouted over the roar of engines and cheering crowds, "Maya, what are you waiting for?" "No worries, Raphael," Maya answered. "Flaps down, throttle up." And now they took off into the air. The other contestants looked up in amazement. Maya and Raphael hovered, and they sped past them all. Before long, Maya and Raphael coasted across the finish line to the cheers of the waiting crowd. They kept rolling clear across the grounds. Maya slammed on the brakes, stopping just short of the lake at the edge of the school field. Raphael noticed a startled frog leap up from a lily pad and dive into the water. He raised his eyebrow and looked at Maya. She smiled. "Raphael, are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Raphael just nodded. And off they went. I've read this story to my own children countless times, and I love how it reminds us that we do not have to do everything exactly the same way everyone else does. In fact, it's usually when we try something different, when we follow our own inspiration, that something really magical happens. Thank you for this time.
Our reading is by Adrienne Rich and is titled Transcendental Etude. No one ever told us we had to study our lives. Make of our lives a study, as if learning natural history or music. That we should begin with the simple exercises first, and slowly go on trying the hard ones, practicing till strength and accuracy became one with the daring to leap into transcendence, take the chance of breaking down the wild arpeggio, or faulting the full sentence of the fugue. And in fact, we can't live like that. We take on everything at once before we've even begun to read or mark time. We're forced to begin in the midst of the hard moment, the one already sounding as we are born.
Thank you, Nancy. You may notice that I have a taller body, and so I'm struggling to figure out how to hold my manuscript while also speaking into the microphone and to you, so bear with me as I sort that out. You know, when I'm in a new worship space, I like to imagine the history that it contains. Important events have happened right here. Weddings, memorials, child dedications, vigils and organizing for justice. It also contains personal histories. It includes the feelings and experiences of people that they had when they first visited this congregation. Feelings that maybe encouraged them to return or possibly drove them away. It holds quiet tears and private aha transformations. And it reverberates with musical notes and passing phrases preached from this pulpit that inspired, challenged, troubled, and comforted. And as we heard in this morning's chalice lighting, this space has been waiting for us and is made sacred by our coming together. You see, the mere fact that we are gathering in this space this morning honors the values and dreams and the hopes of prior generations of this congregation. In ways obvious and not so obvious, this very building reflects decisions and choices made by those who came before and who imagined a future for this congregation and our shared Unitarian Universalist religion, even as they struggled to make sense of their own time. And they did so rooted in a faith that sustained them and encouraged them to move confidently into an unknown and uncertain future with hope and love together. I believe that this is the kind of faith that is required to help us navigate the present that the poet Adrian Rich describes as the hard movement of the transcendental etude, when we must take on everything all at once before we've even begun to hone our skills, before we can fully understand where we are on the sheet music of life. From a young age, I've loved playing and listening to music, and I imagine there are several people in here who share that passion. And I must also confess that I have my own fair share of anxiety dreams. You know those dreams, the ones where you show up to work or school completely naked or completely unprepared? And I think my love of music is why one of my recurring anxiety dreams places me in the middle of a performance of a song I know by heart, but I keep drawing a blank and flailing around the fretboard for the correct note, even as the rest of the musicians plow forward and the audience starts looking at me with disappointment. That feeling of drawing a blank, that flailing around the fretboard, that feeling of embarrassment and even shame, to me that sometimes is what it feels like to be living in this moment, facing the challenges of this time, feeling like we know the song we want to sing and how we'd like to sing it, but struggling to find the note. And all the while, time keeps plowing ahead, and we feel the audience, the future, looking on, perhaps more than a little disappointed in our performance. But here's the thing, though. I've learned that the truly incredible musicians or actors or athletes or organizers or revolutionaries, when they hit that point where they're drawing a blank, when the sheet music or script or game plan or ways of doing things no longer works for them, They don't flail about. What do? They improvise. For my taste, the best musicians are those who take a song as it is written and then make it something new. They make it jazz. They take what they know, what they've learned, and they play by feel. They shift the song. They remake it. They lean into their faith and dreams, and the song becomes something still recognizable but new. In a performance where there are no wrong notes, just new notes, played at the right time for the right time. I think of the song My Favorite Things from the musical Sound of Music. You know, the one with raindrops and roses and whiskers on kittens and other things that we might remember to find comfort when the dog bites or the bee stings or when we're feeling sad. Don't get me wrong, I love that song and I love that musical, and the way Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote that song in 1959 has offered comfort to children and adults like me for decades. I imagine it could even have provided comfort for a family of wealthy Austrian landowners who had the means and resources to flee the Nazis. But the same song might not have offered the same comfort for those people whose very existence was threatened by the rise of Nazi fascism, those who could not flee. And maybe it didn't offer the same comfort to the saxophonist John Coltrane, a black man living in Jim Crow America in 1959. So Coltrane took the song, and with McCoy Tyner on piano, Steve Davis on bass, and Elvin Jones on drums, they made it sing for them, for their time, attuned to their experience and their vision. They leaned into whatever faith they had in themselves, in the future, in the power of possibility, and they built something new out of a tune that they had heard. I share this because I think a similar improvisational spirit has been worked in the history of our shared Unitarian Universalism. For example, the notion that revelation was sealed and that Christian scripture was the only inerrant source of religious and moral teaching didn't work for our ancestors. Neither did the notion that some people would be forever damned while others would be saved. So they improvised. They took the song, the story, the perceived reality as it was in the time and context into which they were born, and they reinterpreted it. They made it sing for them, for their times, attuned to their experiences and their faith and hope for the future. And just like our even more immediate ancestors in faith, those who established and built this particular congregation, the more distant, larger-than-life forebearers of Unitarian Universalism made choices rooted in a faith that sustained them and that encouraged them to move into an unknown future with hope and love, even as they struggled to make sense of their own time. And in ways obvious and not so obvious, today's Unitarian Universalism reflects those choices. And much of this is for the good, for the great even. I understand that over the last 3 Sundays, my friends and colleagues, Brenna, Catherine, and Reverend Karen, have explored some of the UU essentials that reflect this greatness. UU essentials such as the fact that we acknowledge spiritual inspiration and moral wisdom come from many sources, including personal experience, and that revelation and truth are not sealed. That we seek and celebrate diversity, and we enter into covenantal relationships as communities to keep the faith with each other through our diversity and difference. And that we profess an unabashedly liberal faith, one rooted in the belief in the inherent worth and dignity of each person and the interconnectedness of all things. Whether you have been a UU for your entire life, or like me, you came to this faith in your adulthood, or you just decided to check out this church this morning, this is a chosen faith. And as features of a tradition we have chosen, or might yet choose, these UU essentials are our spiritual inheritance, and we are right to claim them proudly. And yet, Sometimes the things that may have seemed right to our ancestors in their times no longer look so correct or were clearly wrong when we examine them from where we are today. For a specific example, in the early 20th century, the Unitarian belief in the ability and responsibility of people of faith to improve their life and help others launched public health and public education efforts, but it also contributed to the growth of the eugenics movement, which was grounded in the belief that it was both possible and preferable to perfect humanity through selective reproduction and forced sterilization, a movement that was embraced by Hitler and the architects of his genocidal machinery. But there are less obvious ways that the choices of our ancestors continue to impact Unitarian Universalism in problematic ways. For example, an emphasis on the value of reason and intellect throughout our history has at times crowded out the revelatory and prophetic power of lived experience and emotion. For another, an optimistic belief in never-ending progress and the promise of the divine's universal embrace has, at times, made it hard for UUs to wrestle with the problem of evil, let alone our own participation in it. And let us not forget that some of our UU ancestors literally wrote the books on rugged individualism, arguing for unrestrained and unassisted personal responsibility, a don't tread on me mindset that has dangerous effects and has had disastrous effects on marginalized people in this country and around the world. I believe it was these values of our ancestors that helped foster some of the ways of being in our own congregations that, despite our best efforts and perhaps without our even realizing it, have perpetuated in our own communities of faith the same systems of racism and marginalization that has plagued the rest of our broader society. In the blurb for this service, I shared a quote from activist Grace Lee Boggs. She observed that history is not the past. It is the stories we tell about the past. How we tell these stories has a lot to do with whether we cut short or advance our evolution. I understand that here in Virginia, you recently had a gubernatorial election. And if I recall, quite a bit of the debate was centered around how we tell the stories of American history. In some ways, that question, it seems to me, boils down to whether we are to make of history an idol, something to worship, something to adhere to as true and good forever and always, a source of power for the powerful, or if we are to consider history as something like the poet's transcendental etude, complicated, full of contradictions and difficult parts, something that is in full swing even as we are thrust into the middle of it. Which of these approaches, Grace Lee Boggs might ask us, cuts short our evolution, and which advances it? Well, if you know anything about Grace Lee Boggs, you know her answer would obviously be the latter. And if we take that approach, if we recognize that our history, like our present, is difficult and complicated, we can begin to reckon with it. We can account for who has gained and what has been gained and by whom. And we can also recognize what and who were lost. Then together we can begin to make things right and we can begin to make things better. This is an absolute necessity for our nation and is also necessary for our beloved Unitarian Universalism. This means digging back into the stories we tell of our history and to examine even the stories we tell about our present in order to recognize where we as a people of faith have fallen short of our ideals. And then we can begin to chart a path forward. This is hard work. And it is difficult work. And the UUA's Commission on Appraisal and Commission on Institutional Change have been doing this work, and they have helped make it clear that there is real pain in our shared history and in our present. And we must neither forget it or abdicate our responsibility to make it right. The good news, and there is good news, is that there is always a chance to celebrate our shared history, our shared present, stories of lives saved, of challenges met, of injustices opposed, stories of weddings and memorials and child dedications, stories of quiet tears and private aha transformations, stories that reverberate with musical notes and passing phrases preached from this pulpit that inspire, challenge, trouble, and comfort. So then what are we to do? Here and now, as we try to make sense of the world and our complicated history, while also finding our way forward into an uncertain future. I earlier invoked one of our popular refrains in saying that this is a chosen faith, and now I'll invoke another. Unitarian Universalism is also a living faith. It is rooted in its past, but it is not bound by it. I believe that one of our responsibilities, both as descendants and ancestors in this faith, is to make it our own, to study it, to live it, to feel it, to learn the essential tune of Unitarian Universalism by heart, and then play its new notes, the right notes for the right now. So, beloveds, let us chart a new tune. Let's improvise. Let's lock in with each other like a beloved community of jazz musicians. Let's change the arrangements and notes that no longer work for us. It's time to play the right notes for right now. The notes that honestly reckon with both the joy and pain in our past and that take us forward into an uncertain future, guided by a faith that sustains us and encourages us to move confidently forward with hope and love together. Amen, and may it be so. And as our time comes to a close, we extinguish our chalice flame. And though we will extinguish our chalice flame, we carry within us what we kindled, the light of inspiration, the warmth of compassion, the fire of commitment. May we bring these gifts into our lives and share them radiantly out in the world.
And now, in our Accotink tradition, I ask you to please stand. And if you are here, extend your hands outward to your fellow Accotinkers, and Kirk, and Brad. And if you are at home, please extend your hands out towards your screen so that you can join with us as we say the words of David Bumbaugh. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity.
Beloveds, this time has been waiting for us to gather our dreams of justice and peace, to open our hearts and speak our minds, to live with compassion and loving kindness. This time has been waiting for us to draw breath of common purpose and to share the urgency of new possibilities. Let us live into this moment, and in faith and hope and love, let us move forward into an uncertain future together. Go in peace. Amen.